Dear students, welcome to the next video. Now we have seen how both these forms or types of paradigms, they have their own distinct ideologies. We could draw a kind of comparative analysis, and what you need to do is make a kind of comparative analysis. You could be asked to draw for your discussion in the next slot when we'll meet. So what you should have is in a way of in a kind of table or in a kind of comparison or contrast. You should draw how both these types differ from each other. You could see, and they are available in their characteristics. So after reading the whole document and after listening to these lectures, you could be able to draw a kind of comparative analysis between positivism and pragmatic and the next one, interpretivism. And you could see the first difference, that is universal versus local, universal versus individual, and then generalizations versus or law of generalization would be converted into law of localization. And then context is the next thing that you could draw your comparative analysis, how context in one situation is significant and how in another situation it is a kind of meaningless activity. And then truth and knowledge is absolute, and truth or knowledge could be discovered out there somewhere, or truth and knowledge. Whereas in constructivism or interpretivism, we could see that how truth and knowledge is relative. Truth of every situation differs from truth of a country or a community of another background. So truth changes as far as its appearance, as far as its application is concerned. So it changes with the change in situation. Truth is relative in constructivism, whereas it is absolute, it is out there somewhere in positivism. And the belief of cause and effect, you have already seen that how they are separable in this particular field of positivism, where they are one thing leads to another thing, one thing is the result of an outcome of another thing, whereas they in the constructivism intermingle into each other and they remain part and parcel of mixture or of dialogic nature, whereas they talk to each other and they remain in a kind of dialogic relationship. And inquiry can be quantified. The results of inquiry can be quantified in positivism, whereas in constructivism, it would be qualified and it would be in a qualitative type of analysis, discussion based analysis, where you go for the interviews, where you go for the opinions, where you go for the belief system of that community, and the belief that theory can be used and to predict the control the outcomes and to control the outcomes, whereas you do not control the outcome in the constructivism, and outcome you leave it to whatever the results, whatever the outcome of the situation, and you leave it to the natural situation, and where we see that whatever the natural outcome of the situation occurs. But here in you can control everything, you can manipulate everything, and you can just find out the results of your own liking and your own disliking in the ways you want or in the manners you want to achieve. The next one is that research should follow scientific method of investigation, whereas you could see that in constructivism you don't need to follow that type of the method of investigation, rather things can be formulated in a different point of view. And then formulation of hypothesis is there, whereas there are other objectives and there are research questions. And then you could apply empirical and analytical approaches, whereas over there constructivist approaches or grounded theory will be applied. Empiricism doesn't work in that particular field, and then you find out the objective reality over here, where you, as in constructivism, subjectivity is allowed and subjective interpretations are allowed, and then you believe that the ability to observe knowledge, you have that ability to observe knowledge, whereas in the other one you do not believe in the observation, and rather you go into the minds of the individual, you understand them. And then the researcher's ultimate aim is to establish the comprehensive universal theory to account for the human behavior, whereas there is no universal theory. Universality cannot be applied. Individuals differ from different situations. Individuals differ from changing community. Every 50-kilometer language changes. Every 50-kilometer their accent changes. Every 100-kilometer their belief system start changing. So every community, every tribe, they have their own rules, regulations, their own behavior. And then the application of scientific theory is there, whereas over there scientific theory is not at all applicable, rather it is the one that remains in you could see questions, and that can be questioned over there. So positivism and social constructivism, they are different in their epistemological approaches, their concern with the nature, their acquisition and their limits and their grasp of knowledge. And positivism relies on empirical evidence. Social constructivism relies on the learning through the social interaction. In order to gain the social positivism endeavors to be objective, social constructivism endeavors to be subjective. The metaphor of a machine is often applied to positivism. Social constructivism is more likely to compare to the society, to an organism, to an even ecosystem. So you have seen that how societies change, how situations change. With the changing situation, constructivism goes in opposition to positivism, and constructivism is different. So what you need to do is draw a kind of analogy between positivism as well as constructivism, whereas you could see that how both of them differ in their approach, in their ideology, and in their philosophy, and how they follow a particular pattern